You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 295. Planning for What's Possible, a client case study with Ellen Nystrom. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, I'm looking forward to you meeting our guest and my client, Ellen Nystrom. Ellen founded Nystrom Design in 2009 and is the CEO and principal designer. Ellen and her team specialize in finding thoughtful ways to bridge classic and modern designs, creating spaces that strike a balance between bold choices and understated sophistication. They have built a reputation for excellent client care and the ability to reimagine modern interiors that are inviting, elegant, and personalized to each client. In my conversation with Ellen today, you are going to discover how Ellen handled her fears prior and during her sabbatical. We're also going to be giving some tips and behind the scenes of how she planned and set her business up for a sabbatical. If you've ever wanted a sabbatical and wondered how you can do that in your business, you should definitely take a listen. You will discover the work she did to overcome those fears, how I played a role as her business coach, how Ellen defines productivity now versus prior to her time away from her business, ways taking her sabbatical impacted Ellen and her business, and what she learned about the impossible, and so much more. We're going to dive into that conversation in just a moment, but before we do, I want to let you know that I can work with you too. If you're interested in finding out more about what that might look like working with me, either privately through my one-on-one peak performance coaching program or my group coaching program, Leverage Lab, then I would love to talk to you. As you're listening to this conversation with Ellen and you are thinking about your own dreams in your business or things that you thought, but you told yourself they were impossible, or you're not sure how to get from where you're at to where you want to go, that is exactly what I help my clients with. So I invite you to schedule a discovery call so that we can discuss partnering together to help you get unstuck, reduce stress, determine a clear path forward to increase profits. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/call. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/call and get that scheduled today. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. How are you today?
Hi, Amber. Thank you. I'm doing great.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you here today. Before we dive into just chit chat, I wanted you to share about yourself a little bit more than what we heard in the official bio.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I run an interior design business out of San Francisco and have just celebrated my 14-year anniversary of owning a business. And I live here with my two teenage sons, one who's going off to college in the fall. The other one is a freshman in high school. And my husband and I am really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's dive in. So in these types of conversations with my clients, I love to just start with can you share in your own words, what were some of the challenges or what was the reason why you decided to reach out to me for us to potentially work together? What was going on for you?
Yeah. So time management is this puzzle that I felt like there was a solution for that everyone else knew or other people knew that I didn't know. And so so it was sort of a general desire to see if there was a different way to look at the way I was managing my time was sort of the overarching theme. And then, as you know, when we started working together, I had made a decision previously that I was going to take a sabbatical in the summer. And you and I started together, I think, in January, and the summer was fast approaching. And I felt like it was a really good time to get some help managing the time so that I would be ready to do the sabbatical, which was almost a 2-month time period that I stepped away from the business.
Yeah. When we first started working together, I loved that you were like, I did it, like it's scheduled, but now we're going to work on how it's going to happen and maybe work on all the stuff that can come up on the mindset side of taking 2 months off.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that you put it out there as the goal, because that really became a lot of the center of our conversation about, either mindset or your schedule or preparing or, what strategic decisions need to be made in the business. And it wasn't that if it was happening, it was like, how enjoyable will it be? Because it was already on the calendar. You had your plane tickets, but we wanted you to really enjoy and have a healthy business when you came back.
Yeah, that's right. I already had it blocked out, but I had not yet told my clients, I think, when we started working together. I was like still sort of getting up the nerve to share with my clients. So we worked through some of the mindset aspects of that, which turned out to not be a big deal. Clients were very supportive, but I felt very strongly about getting the projects to a certain point before leaving and making sure that my team member would have things to work on while I was away, and the clients would feel like progress was still happening while I was away. So we worked on all of that together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So while also working and getting ready for the, sabbatical, one of the things you had just mentioned was you thought everyone else had this like magic thing figured out about time management. And so I'd love to just ask you, on the other side of working together for a year, do you still believe that someone just has it magically figured out? Like, what did you learn about the time management and productivity?
So I think it was really helpful during some of our early sessions to just share my calendar with you. And we just dissected it and talked about some of the pacing that was being set by how I was scheduling meetings with clients. That was a big theme for us. So I think, it was tweaking some things in the calendar. It was also like reconstructing my thinking about how to schedule client meetings. And ongoing effort for me has been to be okay with extending timelines. Mm-hmm. And that was something we talked about, was like, that sometimes the sense of urgency is somewhat self-imposed. Of course, clients want things to get done at a steady pace, but sometimes I'm creating my own sense of urgency. And so that was, I think, when we opened up the calendar and looked at it, we did make some adjustments. And also we talked about like what thoughts were leading to this belief that I was somehow doing it wrong.
Right. Okay. So I actually do want to speak to that, because your specific example here, I remember it coming up as like, so I had these certain feelings about client meetings. It feels like a lot. It feels like a lot before running up to it. It feels like a lot afterwards. And so we really unpacked that, because that could have been a throwaway statement, like, like suck it up, buttercup, but like, that's not it. At the end of it, what we realized was that you had some assumptions on what those client meetings needed to look like, and you chose to restructure it. So this really was like
Mhm.
this intersection of like making some strategic business decisions of how you
Yeah.
serve the clients. Then that impacted the actual calendar, which is always a good thing. And
Mhm.
then also it was the mindset around what that should look like, could look like. What does that mean for you? And so I think that's like a good analogy for a lot of the work we did was it was always this intersection of we kept your calendar, we looked at your calendar a lot. It was like where we would do a lot of our work, and then the intersection between like strategy, business strategy, making some decision and some mindset. Would you agree with that? I know that was my experience of working together, but is that how it
Yeah.
felt for you?
Yeah. It was all those things layered together. And you're right about like my mentality about meetings was this almost sense of dread going into them. And once I was in them, I really enjoyed connecting with the clients, moving the project forward. But because I was probably trying to fit too much into every meeting, it would create this sense of dread, and I'd sort of put them off a little bit. Instead of, I think you and I kind of looked at, well, could I meet more frequently with clients and cover less in each meeting? And in some cases, that was really helpful to do it that way and created less buildup or pressure on the meetings.
That's the exact word that I was thinking when you were speaking was build up. Because when you
Yeah.
shared with me, you're like, I love the meetings. Like you literally love being with your clients. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
how can we solve for the buildup? And because there was so much covered, it was the wrap up with you, your
Right.
team, what that looked like on the schedule. And so, it was just really getting curious with it to say, well, what if it looked different? What could it look like? And it felt more joyful, bookending it, right? The run up, the actual meeting, and afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really great example of challenging something that probably felt not great, but until you started asking questions, it wasn't that easy to imagine what it could look like, right? It's really
Yeah.
asking those questions. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you noticed on my calendar that I do have time block. I use a time blocking system, and I had project work blocked out, but I didn't actually have a time block for client meetings. And even though like the client meetings are never rarely at the same time every week, I wasn't holding time for client meetings. So then when a client would request a meeting or we realized it was time to schedule a meeting, it would take time away from some other time block in a particular week, which would also create stress. So now that I have that time blocked out every week for at least one client meeting, I can shuffle things around. Like,
Yeah.
that
Which
time is
feels
there.
way better, right?
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And it was a really like, it was more of just a shift in thinking about it, because it wasn't like I actually gained any time in the week. It just was like I reserved some time that was dedicated to that task.
yeah. And it was fighting reality to not have it on the calendar because it's always going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Exactly.
high value activity for you. It's servicing the client at the highest level outside of your design work. And yet you're right, it wasn't on the schedule. And so what I have found when that happens, even though it's high value, it's enjoyable, closest to the dollar, because it doesn't have a place on the schedule, there's some guilt around it. Like, oh, I should be doing this other thing, or I should be doing financials, or I should be in this other meeting with a team member, when that's not really true. And by just creating that space, because you do use a block schedule, it allowed you a lot of flexibility without the guilt of not doing something else.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then, of course, if there's a week when I don't have a client meeting, there's plenty of other things to fill in that spot.
Right.
So,
Bonus time.
yeah,
That's
right.
the best time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's circle back to the sabbatical. So,
Mm-hmm.
as you were leading up to the sabbatical, what were some of the thoughts that were coming up for you? Fears, actual challenges with your schedule about preparing for the sabbatical?
Yes. So, I mean, a lot of it was logistical type things of there's a lot to do on the home front to be gone for 2 months. So there was that. And then there was the actual planning of what I was going to be doing during the time I was away. And of course, the project, the workload leading up to it of wanting to, I had set some milestones that I wanted to get to with projects and wanted to have meetings with the clients that we were working with at the time before leaving. And so it was just recognizing that there was a greater workload to get to that point. And I think a couple months before sabbatical, you and I looked at the number of hours that I was able to work on project work per week and recognized that if I wanted to get to the milestones, I was going to need to find a little extra time. So that was a little like an internal conflict. For me. I had been, working on actually reducing the number of hours that I work in a work week. And then it was sort of like increasing the number of hours for a finite amount of time and having to remind myself that it was not necessarily the new normal, but it was in service of having this break, this ability to step back for a little bit of time.
Yeah. And I think you spoke to it before, but if my memory serves me correct, because I mean, we're talking a year ago, we're over a year ago that we're reminiscing back, right? So if my memory serves me correct, you had just said this too, was that you had some assumptions on the milestones. You had self-imposed milestones. And so when we started looking at your bandwidth capacity and the amount of time before going on your sabbatical, it was like a math formula that was like black or white. Like, this is to hit these milestones. This is how many hours you need. This is how many you have. And I remember saying, so which of these are like hard deadlines and milestones? Let's start with those first. And if we reimagine this so that we can be closer to the hours you wanted to work a week, what would that look like? And really kind of laying that out. And I think that if we hadn't, together stepped away and looked at it from a higher version, like a higher view, you could have gone into that and just kept those milestones as hard and fast and been really stressed about it and not questioned, could it look different?
Right. Yes. Yes. I think it was helpful, very helpful to sort out like what did I really feel committed to doing and what was part of like what I refer to as what else thinking of like, I think of this one thing, and then that leads me to think of 5 other things that are related, but don't have to get done. And so there was a little bit of like, well, if I don't do it before I leave, how would I capture it for when I get back? Could I delegate it to my team member to do while I was away? It was also a helpful like thought process. And the other thing that I'll say is it was an exercise in not starting anything new. That was a really big piece of it. I think, the preparing to go on sabbatical was maybe as like powerful as actually being on sabbatical, because I had to really stop starting anything new. And that felt really foreign.
Yeah. And there was some like fears around that too. Like, what would that do to the business? Would clients wait? How will this affect the business? And you really needed to hit those one by one and find out if they were true or not. And if they were true, how then would you deal with it? And you want to share with them how much of that was true?
Yeah, I think that it was, I think the best example is new project inquiries. And when those were coming in, it would have been last spring. So last March, April, May, as I was leading up to sabbatical. Well, there were a couple of project inquiries that came in probably around March. And I had started to agree to do the preliminary consultation, which will lead into writing a proposal. And you and I talked about at least one of them. I remember I realized I couldn't take it. And I'd already like agreed to meet with them and kind of started that discovery process. And then I needed a little bit of a pep talk to call them and tell them, to thank them, but decline the project. And that was a very like uncomfortable feeling. And it led to a lot of like self-doubt about, well, when I get back from sabbatical, will we have enough work if I don't like keep taking projects? And fortunately we were in a position where the projects that we were working on, continued through, and new projects have come in since. But there is just that as a business owner, it's hard to say no, especially if it looks like a potentially like, appeal, like a good match.
Right. And in that situation, it was because there was already set hard deadlines with like the contract. There was already things set in motion that didn't work with your timeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was just, I knew that the projects we were working on, we were at capacity.
Right.
And then I was going to step back for 2 months. And so there just wasn't anyone to like kick off the new projects. And I could just tell we didn't have the capacity for anything new.
I'm sure that pep talk said something about holding your bigger goal, right? The bigger goal, which is like, this is what you had set out to do as a sabbatical. We wanted to enjoy it. We don't want it to be stressed. And so when we have those types of really big goals, while in the moment it wasn't easy to call them back and say thank you, but no thank you. But when you can hold on to say, okay, well, I'm doing this for a reason. It's actually so that I could do this other thing that's a huge goal for myself. Mm-hmm. So actually to that point, I would love for you to share with our listeners, like, why did you want a sabbatical? Like, where did that come from? And what was the intention for it? Why did it matter to you?
Yeah, I guess it's just like this idea when I don't remember when I first like learned about the idea of a sabbatical, but I've always felt like summer is just a time for some level of growth, some transformation. I grew up going to summer camp and then I worked at summer camp. And so there was always this mentality for me of like, summer is a time to step away and do something different. And I hadn't done anything like that for many years since adulting. And so I think as many of us came out of the COVID time, feeling a sense of burnout, and I could feel that coming on. And I just felt like it was a time to press pause a little bit and just step back. I had so many different like creative projects that personal creative projects that I hadn't tended to in a long time that I wanted to explore. And then I think there was a part of me, well, here's a very practical aspect of it. Well, I read that book, Clockwork by Michael Michalowicz, thank you. And it's a book about like kind of helping your business sort of run itself to a certain extent. And he advises like, test it out and, take a month off. And after reading that, I was like, could I? It planted the seed. And so all these things sort of came together. My kids were going to be both at their summer camps for 3 weeks in the summer, and the timing worked out. And so there was just this like looming a question of like, could I even do it? And so there was a piece of that, of wanting to know that I could step back in that way.
Yeah. All right. So you can do it. So let's go fast forward. And we actually met during your sabbatical. Right.
Yeah.
And we had also played with the idea of just pausing it all together, coaching. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying something like, we could, but I feel like we want to make sure we're on the right track on your sabbatical. Like, can we do just one check-in? So we did pull back a little bit on the coaching, but let's fast forward to, you had already taken several weeks off with your family for vacation, and now your family leaves you.
Right.
And you are on sabbatical completely by yourself. And so what do you remember about that coaching session and that experience when we checked in when you first started your sabbatical?
Yes. So I remember that very well. I'm so glad that you encouraged me to keep those meetings. What I did not anticipate when I was planning the sabbatical was that I would feel like lost a little bit in the beginning. And I remember it was, I think, my second day alone. My family and I had traveled together for the first 2.5 weeks. And I stayed on in Charleston. They flew home. And I was sitting in the hotel room and I just felt really like ungrounded and almost like, what have I done? What am I going to do for the next 3.5 weeks that I have on my own? So that was interesting. And we really talked about it. You have a form that we fill out before our coaching sessions that like has us rate our level of productivity. And I rated myself low, and we talked about that. And you encouraged me to consider what would be, I think it was like, what would be what does productivity mean on sabbatical? And it really flipped that whole mindset upside down for me, where I was able to reframe the term productivity, which is such a loaded term, and just kind of get back on track with why I wanted to do a sabbatical to start with.
Yeah. That feeling ungrounding, I don't think, while it was a surprise for you, I don't think it was for me, only because I knew how much you ran on a schedule, and you were a block schedule and you thrive in the structure of your schedule. It just normally when you're running your business. And so how foreign that feels, it's like, oh my gosh, there is a sense of security and safety sometimes with okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing and I got the schedule and the routine. And, you wake up and you feel like you're checking something off the list, which is what people typically, define productivity as. So all that goes to the side. I also remember talking to you about you saying how often you were going to check in on your email while being gone. Do you remember that conversation?
I think at that point, was I going to check every day?
Every day.
Yeah.
And you said that like it was not a thing. And I'm like, hold on. I know what your goals are for the sabbatical. I know how hard you work to get here. And hold on. And you had not been checking it when you were on vacation that often. But your brain said, this is all that, brain mindset work, right? But your brain said, okay, vacation's over. I'm on sabbatical. And there's almost this we all have different things we should on ourselves and in business. But yours was like, I should be checking back into my business. And I remember being like, is it fine now? You've been gone over 3 weeks. Is it really necessary to pull yourself into that energy of checking your email every day? And I know I was looking at how do we preserve and protect your energy during your sabbatical? Because it could be really hard to dip into the hustle of work and the mindset of work. But also you were seeking out freedom, creativity, and inspiration and rejuvenation. And those would be kind of at odds checking your email every day.
Right. Yes. I'm so glad you remembered that, because you encouraged me not to, and you were absolutely right. And it changes the energy completely.
So to circle back, I kind of went in a different direction. So how did you end up defining productivity for yourself while being on sabbatical?
Yeah, it was, there's that term flow that people talk about when you sort of lose track of time, you get involved in an activity. And I was calling it creative flow. And so I had for one, I was traveling. And so I do love the feeling of being in a city that's new and exploring. And then I also had some creative projects that I wanted to work on. And I sort of experimented with different ways of like starting the day without a plan and just, to see what that felt like. And so I don't know exactly how I define productivity. I guess it was
like being in the moment of enjoying this thing that you worked so hard to create, which was your sabbatical.
yeah.
Because when my clients check in and they rate themselves low, man, I've
Mm-hmm.
had literally just like you, I've had other clients that come back from vacation and they're like a 1. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, I wasn't working. And I'm like, hold on, but may I remind you of your goals? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so in this instance, I would say, okay, Ellen, so what was your goals? Your goals were to fully enjoy vacation with your boys and
Mm-hmm.
go on sabbatical. Are you doing that? And
Right.
if we define productivity as showing up our best, doing our best activities, like the things that, get us towards our goal, you were living your goal. So I would personally, as
Yeah.
your productivity coach, rate you top notch. And just that little nuance of reframing, it's like, oh my gosh, like this is guilt free. Like I am being
Mm-hmm.
right exactly where I need to be. Um,
Yeah.
all right. So you also use the word experiment, which I really just want everyone to hear that again. So I just want to echo is that there wasn't a right way that I was able to tell you. That's not how I coach. And there's not a right way that you just knew this is how you act during a sabbatical. That was actually the journey, was you were actually finding how you can get into your creative flow quicker and faster. Because the truth is that a lot of your work requires that when you do get back. So like, what did it for you and what time of the
Yeah.
day and what did you do before and after? It was all an experiment on
Mm-hmm.
how you could find that for yourself, right?
Yeah. And I did go into, I had some projects in mind. And one thing I had wanted to do for several years is there's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's sort of like a workbook that's sectioned off into 12 weeks of different themes, I guess, with writing prompts and artist dates. And, it's, so I brought that book. And I guess I would say that was the extent of my structure, was to do some writing prompts every day and sort of see where that led me. And that was it was a really interesting process. I
Yeah.
recommend that book to anyone who's sort of feeling disconnected with their artist self, with their inner artist child, as
Yeah.
Julia Cameron calls it.
I love that. And so, there's people listening and they hear like, okay, coaching's customized. So I just want to highlight just something here is that this is where it becomes customized, is that your personality was that you were asking and wanting more structure, right? But also wanting this whole creative sabbatical experience. And so I remember us talking about, well, what could it look like to have just enough structure that it felt comfortable,
Right.
or a
Yeah.
little uncomfortable, but leaning towards comfortable, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of flexibility. And so
Yeah.
one was the practice of this book. And then I
Right.
believe the other one was like you were committed to getting out in the morning and evenings because it was hot. And you're like, okay, that could bookend my
That's
day, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so by creating your own little bookend
Mm-hmm.
routine during this specific time in your life gave you a lot of permission and freedom to then have
Yeah.
that flexibility throughout the day.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And I'm also, there's different little chapters of my sabbatical, but during the one period I was in Savannah for 10 full days. So that was like the longest period for me. There was also this ability to sort of just dive into something that I wanted to do and just do it until I didn't feel like doing it anymore. And so I think that was like the beauty for me is with, time blocking is very helpful in a lot of ways, but it also is the days can feel a little disjointed in having to task switch mentally so many times. It can be exhausting. And so that was like such a delight to just like get immersed in something for as long as I wanted to, and lose track of time. And so I would say that was what felt most productive, to answer your question before. Was just like allowing myself the ability to just really like get into that creative flow until I just didn't feel like it anymore. Not because like it was time to go to a meeting or time to do this or that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I was saying about the customization is like that structure was something like you didn't realize you needed probably till we met day 2, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I feels a little wonky, like uncomfortable. And then finding, okay, so what parts of that could serve you? And then where can you find flexibility? Whereas maybe with another client, they'd be like, no, I'm on sabbatical. Like this is maybe a free for all. This doesn't feel uncomfortable. I've wanted this my whole life.
Yeah.
But that experience would be different for them. And so that's why I'm always cueing in, like, how do we show up our best? Your personality is different than somebody else's. What are the goals that are overarching, and tying them back to that? And that's where it's not a one size fits all of us having that conversation of what it should look like. It's like, well, what could this look like with those kind of parameters, and definitely taking into account your preferences on how you show up best.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you get your sabbatical. The world doesn't come crashing down. The boys are good. The business is good. Clients aren't mad. And I'm saying this because, of course, we think this like 100%, like this is a common thought. And the encouragement here is she did it anyways. You did it anyways. And so you proved yourself wrong. None of those things happened. Let's fast forward to you coming back. What were some of the benefits and ahas of taking that time for yourself for the sabbatical?
So one of the things that I really like tried to hang on to is this idea of starting new things. And that it didn't have to be because I was going to be away for 2 months, that like there might be times just in my regular flow of business where I just don't start anything new. And that has been just a really, it sounds simple, but it's actually harder than, or at least for me, it's harder sometimes. Like there's so many things that come up that sound fun and exciting, or like great opportunities. But when they're all kind of up in the air at once, it can suck the joy out of any of them, because there's just, not that much time in the day. So that was something, is just like getting comfortable with declining or postponing or extending timelines, and just like reshaping how things are scheduled.
Yeah. And I would say really honoring your capacity, knowing what your capacity is and honoring that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So capacity was a big component of thinking about, what do I have capacity for? What does my team have capacity for? And honoring that, like you said. Yeah.
Okay. So then how did that show up with any business decisions, or, even in your personal life? Did you feel like more prepared? Did you come back rejuvenated, inspired? Like, we have this idea of what a sabbatical is.
Right.
How, if any way, did this impact when you came back?
Yes. So I think I was, in a really like peaceful frame of mind, I think, as I came back. But I do remember also, you and I ended up having one of our calls as I was driving. So I'd flown from Atlanta to LA, and then I drove from LA back to San Francisco, and you and I were on the phone while I was driving, like my last stretch home. And I was talking about, I was coming back with sort of like that anxiety of like all the things that I haven't been tending to. And you helped me kind of pick a couple priorities, and see that the other things could be pushed out later. I really wanted to hold on to the mental space that had been created during the sabbatical, to a certain degree. And so we talked a lot about that. I guess it's like, it's like trying to get back in the headspace of how I was getting back into sabbatical, because as you know, I got back from sabbatical, and my husband and I, before the kids were getting back from camp, we had arranged to take some time together and in one of our favorite locations, and ended up buying a cabin in the Russian River area, which was not planned at all. And so whatever headspace I was in before that decision was made, kind of shifted pretty quickly when we decided to make an offer on this place. And then, everything goes into high gear.
And high gear on this like big new goal, like exciting thing. And I remember you and I having a conversation as well. Now, this was after the drive home. So let me go back to the drive home. I also remember us actually what does the calendar actually look like upon reentry? Like we had worked on that. It was like the strategic, to ensure you feel a certain way and that you're not pressured. Like don't overpromise meetings the week you get back. And what does this look like to, have time to get back into the flow of each project and then, have these milestones. Those are all things we talked about, was like the actual re-landing back into the business. But then this opportunity comes up and you buy this cabin, which is just like so exciting. It is a lot, as anyone knows that buys a house. There's, inspections and all the different things, but you leaned into it. And I don't know what would have happened before your sabbatical, but I remember thinking, the sabbatical was for this. Like, I remember thinking this was to clear the slate and show you that it was possible to add something like this in and it would be okay. And the business would be fine. Yeah. That was my take on it. Cause I felt like it was such a blessing. All the details we're not sharing here, but there was so many different things. It was like, it was meant to be.
Yeah. I feel like the sabbatical put me in a frame of mind where I could even consider, as, having a weekend home, which was something, I had put on a vision board for 10 years out, was having a cabin in the woods, that it was going to be after the kids, were done with school, and Eric and I were
sitting on your rocking chair.
Maybe not quite on our rocking chairs yet, but approaching that. Yes. And so it was definitely something that had been explored. It just it found us sooner than I would have expected, but I think we were just open to it. I think particularly because my mind was sort of open, and like you said, I had done something that seemed impossible to do as a business owner, or I had perceived as impossible, of adding this thing to my plate. And so it was like, okay, well, if that was possible, then maybe this is possible too. So it did. I think there was just sort of my mind was primed to be open to this idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When we are in this state or energy of consistently feeling overwhelmed, there is this energy we put out, whether it's, business, I'm too busy for it, or opportunities. I've just seen it time and time again. And so for you to choose this challenge, to prove to yourself it was possible, and then to be open to use that word, that's exactly what happened, I believe, was that you were completely open. And that's the beautiful thing of working on this stuff, is that you no longer tell yourself, I don't have time. It's like, oh, what could happen? Oh, I'm curious. I can do this. Which happened in another area as well that we'll just wrap up with kind of. So in your business, you had an offering that you put pause on. And when you came back, at some point you felt like, all right, I have the capacity to add another service back into how you serve your clients. is there a connection with that of like feeling like you had the capacity from sabbatical, or was it just part of the goals and the journey? I'm not quite sure I know that answer.
Yeah. So it was this flat fee package that we had developed and then got really busy. And when I got back from sabbatical, the other sort of business goal that had been on my mind for a while was to hire a new team member. And so that was something that you and I worked on. And so again, there was a lot of sort of thought work about that. And it worked out that I found the right person to hire, and she joined me in January of this year. And so now having more capacity on my team has enabled me to reopen this package, which has been something that, we do a lot of custom interior design work. And then I always wanted to have another service that was tailored to a faster paced project with a finite beginning and an end. And so this service is that, and it's also something that more junior team members can do with less oversight from me. So it fits well into the structure of the business. And just in terms of like giving team members more opportunity for ownership and having, there's always that challenge with the pipeline and the workflow, and like a custom interior design project can be very consuming for a period of time, and then it can slow down really fast. And so it's just like a really nice service to be able to offer to clients who are a little more hands-on and don't want the full service. But it weaves in nicely with the bigger, longer term projects.
Absolutely. It's very complementary to bandwidth, right? Like as you're saying, for customs, it could be like all hands on deck, very intense, to now it's in someone else's hands. And so you're kind of on maintenance mode, but also cash flow, right? So these large projects are over a large period of time. And so this helps level out those periods where you're on the project, but not all in, deep into the hours. And like you said, it was just, I know that you had it. And then for so many reasons, it was right deposit. And then it was like, and so for so many reasons, it was right to restart it when you did, So I was really happy. And I just wanted to share that part of the story for any listeners too, is that, it took a lot to say, oh my gosh, I had this amazing offering. I love doing it. And it's not the right time. I'm hitting pause. And then to say, I still love it and it is great. And now this is the right time, that a good idea may just be about timing, and to give yourself the grace of being more strategic to say, but is it the right time in the business? And I think you did that really well over that year. Yeah.
I think that's another lesson, is like, just because I have an idea, it doesn't mean I have to execute on it like at that moment. And I think that does tie back to like when I was re-entering regular life from sabbatical, like I had a plan, and then that we quickly reformulated the plan because I was, this other thing came up, this other opportunity came up, and it didn't mean that like those things were never going to get done. It just meant pushing them out a little bit, as opposed to sort of like grinding through just because I said like, I'm going to do, this thing by the end of the year. Like it was okay to push it out.
Oh my gosh. You said it so well. And I want to highlight it because this is a challenge for a lot of business owners, is we have ideas or we have things that are priorities, and all these priorities feel like they're kind of like fighting for attention. And one of the things we were able to do, because you were so clear about your goals, was that, when we did your reentry plan, you had all these projects and we decided, okay, this is number one. When I say we, by the way, for those of you that are listening, is like I'm just repeating what she's saying and allowing her to get to her priorities in a very clear way. I'm not, telling her what her priorities are. So you got your priorities. Then left field comes, this house opportunity comes in, and we say, okay, for this to be a joyful experience, where does this fit on your priority list? And you made some decisions to say, okay, and this one can be put on hold because I'm saying yes to this one right now.
Yeah.
And only when you're that clear that you can literally pull a list out and say, here's the big projects I'm working on, here's my priorities, can you say, is this more important than that?
Yeah.
When it's just in our heads and we have all these half-done projects and we're going in 100 different directions, our brains can't say, okay, I'm going to focus here, but not here right now. Or I'm going to say, I'm choosing this, which is what you got to say. I'm choosing this over this. It's not that easy if you don't have the list. So I just wanted to compliment you on always being so goal focused, having your list, even if that list switched up order and timelines. That was the flexible part.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it was helpful to talk it through with you.
All right. Yeah, sometimes it is because of that. Usually all just lives in our heads, right? All the things. And by just slowing down, taking a step back and again, I always tell my clients, if you're only working on your business when we're together, that's good. And we're going to find more time to work on your business, right? The time we're together is on the business, not in the business.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. So we did before, middle, after. So tell me what you're excited for next in your business as we close up today.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think we have just, like I said, we had just relaunched as of April, really, this Reinvent Your Room service. And already have gotten a few inquiries about it. So my new team member is jumping right in with one of the packages that's 2 rooms, and she's doing a great job. So I'm just excited to see where this goes and to keep kind of streamlining it. Our goal is to make it really an elevated service, but very streamlined from our point of view and the client's point of view.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So and then also I'll just say you get to enjoy your business and lead your team. That is all exciting stuff. That's all stuff you've been working on, obviously long before you and I worked together. But the little bit of journey that we touched on, but didn't go into detail, was the whole hiring. And so now you've got that team. And so you get to step in and grow in that area as well. And your business just gets to grow too.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story of us working together, but more importantly, your own entrepreneurial journey. I find it very inspiring that you were able to have this huge goal and prove to yourself it was possible. And then we get to hear how that rippled into all other areas of your business and life. So thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me. That was really fun to revisit the sabbatical experience, and I appreciate all your support.
Yeah. Is there maybe a sabbatical in 2024?
We'll see. Definitely travel. I don't know that I'll do such an extended period of time, but more focused on how to spend more time working from our new cabin.
There you go. Yeah. I love that goal. Yeah. So completely remote, more 3-day weekends, more 3 or 4 day weekends. I like that goal.
Yeah.
Excellent. I have such a big thank you for Ellen for being so open and sharing her story with us. I personally love learning from other people's experiences and being inspired and empowered by their journey, and just looking to see how I can connect those dots in my own life and how that's going to help me take action. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk, but I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So, what in today's conversation inspired you? We talked about a lot, but the primary thing we talked about was her journey through having this goal of going on this sabbatical and preparing herself, preparing her mindset, preparing her business so that this was the success that she had dreamt of. And she did just that. You may not have at the end of your goal a sabbatical, but what is that? What is that in your business or in the back of your mind, or it's a fleeting thought and you tell yourself, I don't even know how to get there, or maybe that's not possible. I want to tell you that it is possible. And if you need help making a plan, if you need help seeing what that path is to get you from where you're at to where you want to go, then I invite you to partner with me because that's exactly the way that my brain works. And I'm able to help you stay the course because many things, as you know, will come up between the time you declare you want something and the time you've actually achieved it. Life happens, business happens, and being able to navigate those and get right back on track and work the plan is the best way forward. So if you would like to explore working with me and finding out how I can support you with that, I invite you to schedule a discovery call. You can do that by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/call. And if this is your first time here at Productivity Straight Talk, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for being here. Please be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and be sure to take my quiz. I have a quiz. It's called the Next Level Business Owner. And by just taking this quiz for a few minutes, I'll be able to share with you what your primary challenge is in your business. And I'm going to share with you a curated playlist of the exact episodes for you to listen to that will have the strategies that I think that you should be focusing on based on your challenges and results of the quiz. So if you're new, be sure to take that so you know which episodes to go back and listen to first. And if you're not new and you haven't taken the quiz yet, be sure to take it as well. You can get that by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And last but not least, do not keep Productivity Straight Talk a secret. I am so grateful that you're here, and I'm going to be so grateful that you're sharing it with another business owner that you think this episode or any of the episodes of Productivity Straight Talk would be of value to them. So that's my Straight Talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.